Okay, so today we're going to move on to lesson 3. It's called two-way tables. So basically information shared in more than one way. Make sure we put our name and date at the top. So this first picture is not a two-way table. It's called a Venn diagram. Let's see what they want us to do with it. It says the data from a survey of 440 students are shown in the table. The students were asked whether or not they were on the honor roll and whether or not they played a sport. So let's see. Only on the honor roll. So if they're only on the honor roll and not in a sport, that number is going to go here. If they only play a sport, that would be over here. If they play a sport and on the honor roll, that would be an overlap or number in the middle. So we have a vocab word, and those should all add up to 440, which they look like they do. So relative frequency is the ratio, so a fraction, of the value of a subtotal to the value of the total. What is the relative frequency of a student that is on the honor roll and plays a sport? So on the honor roll and plays a sport, that's 250, over to all students that are on the honor roll. Total on the honor roll would be this entire circle, so 115 plus 250, or 250 over 365. And we could find that as a decimal, because sometimes it's easier to talk about things, and not just a decimal, but moving that 2 spots to the right, about 68%. So usually it's a little easier to talk about percentages. People can relate to that. So over half of the students. Vocab word here on slide 2, another one. A two-way table shows data from one sample group as it relates to 2 different categories. The same information from the Venn diagram on the previous page is shown below as a two-way table. Well, we're going to come up with that. Where one category, is represented by rows. So rows go right and left, rows and right. And the other represented by columns. The 2 categories are shown as play a sport and then do not, on the honor roll and not on the honor roll. So if we kind of zoom out and look at these other numbers over here, someone who's on the honor roll and plays a sport would be 250. Someone who's not on the honor roll, not on the honor roll, but does play a sport, is 45. The total for those playing a sport, the total for playing a sport will be 295. Do not play a sport, so that would be on the honor roll, just on the honor roll. But that are not on the honor roll, we'll have to figure that out. And how many students total did they say they represented? Was 440, and that's up here in this other corner. So we can now use our numbers to figure these out. So 250 plus 115 is 365. We got those, and then we could use the 440 and the 295 to figure this other one out. So 440 minus 295 is 145. The difference between 145 and 115 is 30. So and then our last one, 75 here. Adding up those totals. So 365, just to double check, plus 75 is 440, and we could do the 195 plus 145 to get 440. So we're actually missing a number over here that do not play a sport and are not on the honor roll. So something that is not included in those 2 categories gets written on the outside, and that would be our 30. And we could have done that by taking 440 minus those 3 numbers. Okay. So we're going to be constructing two-way tables and then interpreting some of the information inside of them. Felipe surveyed students at his school. He found that 78 students own a cell phone, and 57 of those students own an MP3 player, or an iPod, or an iPhone. There are 13 students that do not own a cell phone, but own an MP3 player. 9 students do not own either device. Construct a two-way table summarizing the data. So some of that is already filled in. The 57 is MP3 player and a cell phone. 13 was an MP3 player and no cell phone. So if you add those together, that would be 70. 13 plus 9 for this total would be 22. We could subtract these two, 78 minus 57, and get 21. 60, 78, yep. We could add these together, 80, 90, 100, to figure out that he surveyed 100 students. And 100 minus 70 is 30 to find the numbers that are missing. And that's what these 2 steps talk about. But you feel free to read through those to figure out the numbers that they are missing. Okay, so all we had to do is construct a two-way table. On this one, again, we're constructing a two-way table, nothing given to us. So there are 150 children at summer camp, and 71 signed up for swimming. So they're giving us totals. 150 students total is going to be down here. 71 signed up for swimming. So swimming, the total that signed up is 71. We now can figure out this information, but we'll keep going here. There were a total of 62 children that signed up for canoeing. So under canoeing, the total would be 62. And 28 of those also signed up for swimming. So canoeing and swimming is 28. Construct a two-way table. We actually have enough information to then figure this out. So we're going to do some subtracting. 150 minus 71 will give us the 79. 71 minus 28 will give us the no canoeing but swimming. 62 minus 28 will give us who are canoeing but not swimming. 150 minus 62 will give us the total of not canoeing. And then the total of not canoeing minus the people who are also swimming will give us those who are not swimming and not canoeing. The people who are going to sit on their butts and play on their phones. So that's how we construct a two-way table. Give them the information they gave you, make sure you put it in the right spot, and either add or subtract to find totals. Okay, now what can we learn from that? So a two-way table can show relative frequencies. Remember, that's a fraction, a decimal, or percent. It can be interpreted all three ways for rows or columns rather than the actual values. By analyzing the relative frequencies in a two-way table, you can determine possible associations between new variables. So when I say, or when you read interpret, we want to write a sentence about it. Let's choose the largest frequency, which will either be the decimal, or I like to write about it in percents. I use the percent, we relate to that more. By row, make sure you talk about the item in the row first, and then the column. If they're asking you to do it by column, talk about the item in the column, and then the row. And you'll see that here in a second. Okay, so here are all our numbers from that other example. Find and interpret the relative frequencies of students in the survey from example 1 by row. So we're going to talk about these first. Cell phones or no cell phones, and one from each line. To find the relative frequencies by row, write the ratios of each value to the total in that row. Round to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to go row first. 57 over its total. So 57 divided by 78. This one's going to be 21 over 78. And then this one's clearly going to be the larger one. This is the 13 over 22 because it's total. And 9 over 22. Because this is by row, that's why we're using the row total. So if these fractions aren't really relatable, so this is going to be the larger fraction since it has a larger numerator. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that as a decimal, and it's about 73%. So I'm going to write 73% in here. And I'm also going to use the larger one in the second row. That's 13 out of 22. That ends up being 59%. And these one would be the smaller, so 100% minus 20 or 73% would be 27%. You could figure it out that way, and 41%. Or you could divide them and move them. So these are clearly the bigger two. That's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to write a sentence to describing, and this would be, what was it, students, children? Oh, yeah, students. Students, 73%, or you can say about 3/4. That's another way to write it. Of students who own a cell phone, that we talk about that first, own an MP3 player. So we talked about the row first, then the column. This one is students who do not, 59% of students who do not have a cell phone have an MP3 player. You could also say more than half. That's another way to represent 59%. Let's do that again with, this time, same information, but by column. So these are the totals we're going to use. So this is going to be the larger number, again, 57 out of 70, 13 out of 70, 21 out of 30, and 9 out of 30. So we're going to use these numbers. 57 out of 70, dividing those and rounding to a percent is 81%. 21 out of 30 is 70%, which then that makes this a 30%, and this makes this one a 19%. We're going to talk about the larger ones. So 81% of people, of students actually, who have an MP3 player, that's the column, so talk about first, have a cell phone. And 70% of students, moving on to the next one, with no MP3 player have a cell phone. So basically by changing row and column, you're changing what group of people you're talking to. Okay, last but not least, slide 8. A pet store conducted a survey on the types of pets owned by the owner's store, construct a two-way table summarizing the data, then find and interpret the relative frequencies by columns. So these are your columns, and it doesn't tell us which one to put where on your homework. It'll tell you if I want you to put cats and dogs, or this will be labeled for you. But if you have cats here, you're going to have no cats in the other column. If you have dogs in the row, then you're going to have no dogs in the other row. And then the last column and the last row are always the total. Okay, so cats and dogs, that would be the 45 in the middle of the Venn diagram. Dogs but no cats, well, that would be 125. Total there being 30, 170. No dogs but a cat would be 78. No dogs and no cats is the number written on the outside, 52. That's 80, 90, 100, 10, 20, 30. Adding those together, we get 300 for the total amount of people surveyed. So 8, 13, 11, 12, 123, 7, 7, 1. Also makes 300. So we're going to interpret these by column. We need to use the frequencies here. So 45 over 123, that's going to be the smaller one, I'm sorry. So we don't want to use the 45. We use a 78 over 123. So if I do 78 divided by 123, that's going to be 63%. 125 divided by 177 is going to be 71%. So I'm going to say for this one, just so you see another interpretation, I'm going to say about 2/3. About 2/3 of people who own a cat, that's a column, they also own a dog. There's my row. So talk about the column first. Then this one would be people, 71% or 70, or about 3/4. About 3/4 of people who don't have a cat, there's my row for, or column first, have a dog. So there's two different types of things to talk about. All right, that's it. Have a great day.